Welcome to Picking Bones. Today we're going to talk about heroes of history. This is something we've discussed on the channel a little bit, especially on the podcast. Something I like to ask people about is who are the historical figures that people look up to. And it is tough because many of the figures that we're taught to look up to, as we grow older and start to look into them a bit more, we find that they're often quite nefarious characters. They're not what we were told they were. And so I wanted to start this series where we could look at some of the characters in history that I think are worthy of admiration. And we're going to focus largely on people who have stood against secret societies, stood against the occult. And so, but when we do this, when we consider heroes and villains of history, I think we just have to consider humanity and our condition in general. And that is to say that we are all deeply flawed. We're all capable of horrible things, and we all have done things that we regret, or at least should regret. Some people like to say they have no regrets, but I think that's a pretty ridiculous outlook on life. But, so when we consider biblical figures, even heroes like King David, even men like this were capable of horrible things. The story of David and Bathsheba, where David has an affair with one of his soldiers' wives and then murders that soldier. It's a terrible thing. It's one of the worst stories in the Bible, in my mind. But David is still portrayed as a heroic figure in the Bible. And he repents of this terrible thing that he's done. And he loves God, and he does things that greatly please God because he's a benevolent king for the most part. But he is still flawed. He's still a man, and he's capable of great sin like we all are. And so I think when we look at heroes and villains, we just have to remember that not everybody's going to be perfect. And if we only want to focus on the negative aspects of someone's life, you're going to find plenty with anyone. But that being said, let's look at some of these figures that I think are worthy of admiration, even though they may have some flaws. And so we're going to start with William Morgan, the original anti-Mason, at least in the political sense. William Morgan was a Freemason who lived in the 1700s, and he decided to write a book exposing the secrets of Masonry. He wrote this book called The Illustrations of Freemasonry, where he went through the first 3 degrees of Masonry and really just showed what the entire ritual was, went through what was said in all these initiation rituals, and he went through the symbolism as well of these orders and illustrated it in his book. Now, for creating this book, the Freemasons were very angry with him, and they conspired to kidnap and murder him. And this they did. They kidnapped him, they transported him all the way up to Niagara Falls, and he was murdered near there by Freemasons. And it wasn't just that a small group of Masons got together and killed this guy. They had a vast network of Masons helping them, not just transport Morgan and get this murder done, but also in the aftermath. There were so many Masons helping on the legal side to cover all this up and to make sure that the perpetrators didn't face charges for what they did, or if they did face charges, they got the minimal sentence. So this book that Morgan created, it's called Illustrations of Freemasonry, and in it, we have all these images of some of the different signs and signals and handshakes and different things that these Masons do. And we also have some of the symbolism in these initiation rituals on display. He goes through, all these initial 3 ranks, giving you the full text and what happens during these rituals. And so this one, many of these images have been commonly circulated on the internet these days. You see a lot of these types of images and the handshake images shown. And this is where a lot of that comes from, is William Morgan's book and a number of books that came after Morgan's book. Because, after what happened with William Morgan, he was murdered, and people realized what had happened, and they formed the anti-Masonic party to take a stand against Freemasonry. And many Freemasons left the order and turned against it, realizing that they were a part of an evil, sinister organization capable of terrible things. And so they too wrote books further exposing the order. And so, many of the popular images that we see on the internet came from this era, where Masonic secrets really start to come to the light and the public finally got to really see what was going on with Masonry. Now we have here, and this comes from a Vigilant Citizen article where he talks about the 2009 Video Music Awards, and how there was essentially a massive occult ritual built into this music awards ceremony. And so we have this image of a man doing this dressed up in this initiation ritual outfit, and we have here, looks very close. She's got this blindfold, the exposed breast. Instead of a rolled up pant leg, she has her, I don't even know what to call this kind of outfit. She has this thing on with the one checkerboard leg, with black and white checkerboard, which is another thing we see in Masonry all the time. So it looks very similar to this Masonic initiation ritual, and it seems as if Pink is being Masonically initiated during this award ceremony. Very interesting stuff. Now, another interesting thing about William Morgan is his wife was named Lucinda, and she ended up, it seems that she ended up becoming one of the many wives. This is a list of the wives of Joseph Smith, who was the founder of Mormonism. Now, so it seems that, Joseph Smith somehow ended up with this anti-Mason, this ex-Mason's wife. This is disputed by some historians, but I thought it was an interesting little thing, odd connection. And Masonry, of course, and Mormonism are tied together, because Mormonism was born out of Masonry. Joseph Smith was a Mason. His brother Hiram was a Mason. His father was also a Mason, I believe. And Brigham Young, the kind of follow-up leader after Joseph Smith, he was also a Freemason. So all of the early Mormons, important Mormon leadership figures, were all Masons. And Hiram, I think this is pretty funny, it seems that Joseph Smith's father named, his one son after Hiram Abiff, the greatest figure in Masonic lore. Hiram Abiff, what is the name of Hiram? It is spelled differently, but it's this name of ancient Hebrew origin, means my brother is exalted. Hiram is a version of Hiram. Yeah, of course. And much of Masonic lore focuses all around Hiram Abiff and Solomon's Temple. So, anyway, Mormonism deeply tied to Masonry. Interesting little connection here with Morgan's wife after he died, getting with Joseph. Now, here's another thing. It's just kind of funny tie to Masonry. Some Mormonism, at least the more traditional Mormonism, they wore this special underwear, these temple garments that included the square and the compass on the breasts. And these are, of course, some of the most important symbols of Masonry. And you see these symbols on the Masonic Lodge. I did that tour video and where I went to the Masonic Lodge of Philadelphia, and you see these symbols like everywhere. So anyway, the point is Mormonism is just loaded with occult and Masonic symbolism. And anyway, so these are a couple of the other books that came out after Morgan's book. So other Masons were inspired to leave the order after they realized what they were a part of actually was sinister. And so a great many Masons left. Avery Allen wrote this book, A Ritual of Freemasonry. We have David Bernard wrote this book, Light on Masonry. And, a lot of these books that came out were really just going through all the degree work, a lot of the initiation rituals and symbolism. And this is where the public really started to get access to all of this Masonic literature and information. A lot of this stuff had been kept secret for a very long time. And this is where stuff really started to come to the forefront. Today we have the internet, and there's so much stuff readily available. We have sites like Sacred Texts, where we can just go read a lot of Masonic works and works from other occultists, and this stuff is all just out there now. But it wasn't like that for a very long time, and people just didn't know the extent of what was going on in Masonry. They didn't know all of the symbolism until it became available through these events. So William Morgan, regardless of what his motivations were, was he just trying to make some money selling some books? Was he really understanding that Masonry posed a threat to society and wanted to reveal that to people? Like, I don't know exactly what this guy's goals were, but I know that through his actions, we've gotten to see so much into Masonry. We've gotten to see what Masonry was about, and America was able to take a stand against Masonry and get a lot of Masons out of power, get a lot of Masons to leave the order, to see for themselves that it was a terrible organization. And it was a really miraculous time in our history that so many of these people were able to recognize what they're a part of was sinister, that they were able to get out of this terrible organization. And so let's look at this is from the gravestone, the monument for William Morgan. It says, sacred to the memory of William Morgan, a native of Virginia, a captain in the War of 1812, a respectable citizen of Batavia, and a martyr to the freedom of writing, printing, and speaking the truth. He was abducted from near this spot in the year 1826 by Freemasons and murdered for revealing the secrets of their order. William Morgan died to expose what Masonry is doing to our society. He died to expose the secrets that they hide from all of us. But they're not secret anymore. It's all out there for anyone who's willing to look. That's what we're doing here on this channel. We're going to look because this stuff needs to be exposed. People have forgotten. Although Masonry on some level was successful because they were able to show so many, or the anti-Masons were successful because they were able to show so many Masons that they needed to leave their order. But ultimately they weren't successful because society forgot about it again. You know, a few generations passed and nobody remembered the threat of Masonry. Nobody remembered that they're willing to murder their own members for revealing their own secrets. People forgot. But at the time, we had these anti-Masonic almanacs coming out. We had newspapers. We had mass gatherings. And we had political leadership stepping up to form a party around resisting Masonry in our government and in our society. It was a wonderful time, and I think we need to bring that back. You know, John Quincy Adams, you know, he said that Masonry is a seed of evil that can never produce any good, and I don't, you know, I completely agree with John there. Masonry is deeply flawed. It's a very dangerous organization. They're willing to kill people to keep their secrets, but they're also willing to overthrow governments, to kill monarchs, to kill whoever they need to put themselves in power. That's a very dangerous type of organization. Now, what John Quincy Adams didn't realize was that Masonry built America. That, you know, it was never for the people. It was always for the Masons. It was for the mystery schools. And so we end here with this image. You know, many people came out with all these images in the newspapers spreading the word of what had happened to William Morgan, how he had been murdered and brought up to Niagara to die an untimely death. And, you know, I think we just got to remember William Morgan, the wonderful things he did, revealing Masonry, their horrible secrets, and truly he became a martyr. His death sparked a massive movement, and we should not forget William Morgan and his sacrifice. And so that's all I've got for you today, guys. This was a first look at one of our heroes in history. Hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to try to do more of these. I can do this sort of a thing pretty quick. Just kind of a brief look at different characters in history. So I'll try to make this a regular thing where we look at different heroes and villains in history and just give a brief overview of who they were and why they were important. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great day, everyone. See you later.